Well, those are two tough acts to follow, but I want to talk to you today about something that a lot of banks aren't even thinking about yet, which is 5G. And we believe that the effects of 5G are going to be subtle and profound over time. Now, why should we even be thinking about it, and how should we be thinking about it? I like metaphors. 3G was this little dirt road. It would get you there, but it took a while. 4G improved it, paved it, but it's still a two-lane road. 5G is a vast superhighway taking a lot of cars very fast all at once. Now, three elements are critical to understanding 5G. The first is speed. It is just fast. And we can measure speed in different ways, whether it is average or top speed, but think about how long it takes to download a 2-hour movie. 3G, it was 26 hours. No one was doing that. 4G, which came out in 2009, so like 8, 9 years later, was 6 minutes. So 260 times improvement. Pretty impressive. 5G is going to be 3.6 seconds. So that's another improvement of 100 times. If you think about that in terms of the improvement over almost 20 years, 26,000 times improvement in speed. So that's a big deal. The next one is capacity. So it's not just speed, but it means a lot more people can be using the same bandwidth at the same time. And around the world, there are different technologies, different spectrums that people are using, but regardless, a lot more people can get on there at the same time. The next is latency, which is just the time it takes a stimulus to produce a response. So if you've ever been in one of those showers with a lot of room between the pipe and the handle, and it takes 3 seconds to change the temperature, you know that is a suboptimal experience. And latency, lower is better. Now, a shortcut on this is just think of 5G as fiber over the air. So what does it mean for banks? That's the big question. And isn't it, faster video, big deal. What does that mean for banks? Aren't self-driving cars where they don't crash into each other or they get directions back going to be much more important? Or maybe media and entertainment, where there are a lot of people all at once having each their own individual experience. Well, yeah, but for banks, think about the implications of being able to access really heavy compute power remotely and centrally, whether it's over the cloud or on-prem. What that does is it turns every device into a thin client, which will have some interesting implications. And it's not going to happen immediately. In the US, it's starting to roll out now, much more fully in 2020. But banks should nevertheless start to think about the implications for their customers and their operations, the front end and the back end. So on mobile, that's one of the key areas. Think about the computation taking place centrally. Has some implications. The app now can become just a pointer to the back-end server. It doesn't have to do all the work itself. And so the native versus responsive design, or even hybrid, becomes eventually a moot point because all the app is doing is pointing to everything in the back end. You can have centralized updates. Everyone's got the same write access at the same time. You can provide better contextual advice, PFM. On the ride over here this morning in a Grab, there was a big lag between where the car showed on the map and where I actually was. That's going to go away with 5G. And so you can provide a lot more advice and feedback to your customers. And the hardware is going to be distinguished now not by its processing power, but by the radio and the camera and whatever other stuff they invent. It's also going to have implications for ATMs and branches. And the biggest ones being for non-fiber branches today, which is a lot of them. So again, branches and ATMs will be thin clients. That means you can start to have customized ATM sessions. My daughter and I will have different screens pop up on the ATM. And despite all we're hearing today, there are still a lot of people for whom the ATM is their digital connection to a bank. Certainly in the US, where we are behind you guys over here. Things like simultaneous translation could be possible. The last mile will be rendered moot, so the branches that remain can be a lot more connected, a lot more high tech. And one more thing, don't forget about wearables, because that's now a thin client. That can be a much more viable way for people to interact with their bank, probably activated by voice. So the other interesting thing, particularly organizationally, is that 5G is ultimately going to turn a lot of hardware spend into data spend. And by the way, that organizationally will start to set up different budget battles because these spends right now are in different parts of the bank. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. There are going to be obstacles. It's going to take time for the carriers, for consumers, for banks themselves to put in the necessary hardware. But there will also be a time where banks have to provide for both 4G customers and 5G customers, and that transition will be, frankly, a little painful. And we just heard about security, and as soon as this comes in, there are going to be all sorts of new attack vectors. I can say that pretty confidently. Alyssa will have to tell you what they are, but they'll be going after it. The other thing is pricing models aren't finalized. Right now, very often for 4G access, banks have basically a pretty small amount that's capped, and they pay up to that, and then there are overages. If there's going to be so much more data flowing through, what's the pricing model going to be has yet to be determined. And there are going to be issues that arise and opportunities, too, that we haven't even imagined. Those opportunities by very clever people, some of whom will probably follow us on the stage today, will be great. But regardless, it is coming. It's time to start preparing if you're a bank. Thanks very much.